Damned English. You know, I was thinking the other day, it's honestly been a super long time since I've done a straight arrows versus something test. You think that's just because the arrow versus stuff is kind of boring, not super dynamic. It's just you standing in a field, kind of loosing an arrow and hitting a target and loosing an arrow and hitting a target. Oh, I totally disagree, especially with the heavier bows. I think there's still like a lot of really cool stuff that we could do.
You see, the problem, Rangers, that you used to be shirtless. Now there are no abs in the photos, so people aren't as interested. And bows off of
woman. Yeah, I get it. I get it. I just think, you know, no one in this party uses armor or shields. I mean, well, Trollo has a shield.
Yes, that is true, Sir Gaines. I did have a shield, but I only have 2 hands, and well, decisions were made.
Hey, respect. Yeah, what are you ladies bickering about? Sound like a bunch of lassies, and I may have just a thing.
Oh great, this guy. I hate that guy.
Well, the Targe has existed in Scottish history from the 12th to the 18th century, with many iterations racing from the English longbow all the way up to musket fire.
Damned English.
What did I do? Halden Hill, Neville's Cross, Hamilton Hill. Look, no one made you walk up a slippery hill in dense formation. Ugh, well, I think everyone's suffered the bad accent long enough. Time to deep dive into the Targe, the Basket-Hilted Claymore or backsword, and the dirk, and test and see how they do. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerd and nerdettes. Now, in the mist-covered Highlands, there was one weapon combination that terrified the English dragoons for over a century, and that was the Basket-Hilted Claymore and the Targe. Today, we're going to be going over what made this sword and this combination special, how it was utilized, the battles that made it famous, how the Highlanders trained with it, how the Targe did against the English warbow, because like I said, it came on early 12th century, so similar iterations of the shield did face the English warbow multiple times in the battlefield, famous duels and duelists who made this legendary, and lastly, kind of talk about the pros and cons of this type of sword versus other similar iterations of the time. Now, this sword didn't come about overnight. It was predated by the German Sinclair hilt sword, which made its way over to Scotland in the 1540s. By the time of the War of the Three Kingdoms, 1639 and 1651, it became much more common in Scotland. 1650 was kind of when it was started to say it made its full presence known. Scottish gunsmiths in places like Stirling, Glasgow, and Edinburgh were producing fully encased iron hands, which was something that was very distinctly European at that time. In Gaelic, the most common term for this type of sword was claymore. So it differs from the large two-handed sword, which is very commonly associated with Braveheart and Scotland, which was this sword here, which was known as the claymore, and that's reserved for two-handed large swords or two-handed great swords. The classic form we know and love today, which is about 33 to 38 inches, 2 to 3 pounds, with the red wrapping around the hound, was kind of crystallized in 1617 to 1700s, and really, I mean, it just looks rather fetching. Now moving on to the Targe. Now the Targe was 19 to 23 inches in diameter, glued together, cross-grained with 2 different slats of wood covered in a cowhide. This was more than just a buckler. It was used for deception because they would often hide a dirk behind it, which I'll go over in a little bit. It was a great smashing tool for a cross. Some of them even had a spike coming out of the front there. The iron boss in the middle was great for absorbing damage, and there's even anecdotal tales that it would stop musket fire from a certain distance, but that's mainly, like I said, anecdotal, and testing that people have done, it doesn't seem to do much about it, even with additional layers of leather on top of it. But it was a great supplemental tool to the dirk and also to the Basket-Hilted Claymore or the backsword. And there's a lot of textual support, historical context, and even writings about it that there was the hidden dirk technique. So the way this worked was that the dirk was carried behind or concealed behind the targe. So during combat or fighting with the broadsword, it would be used in a sense where they wouldn't be able to know if it was drawn or if it was not drawn. So this is illustrated in a lot of different things, and also it's talked about somewhat frequently by Donald McBane, who's one of the most famous duelists in Scotland and wrote basically the book on historical Scottish fencing. He talked about keeping the dirk close behind, the opponent couldn't see whether it was drawn or not, and then whipping out for surprise thrusts to the face or the belly if you were in engagement or entanglement. So this one doesn't have it specifically, but in the 18th century there are shields that do have a little bit of a loop or a sheath inside here, so it actually stay inside of there to be hidden close in the shield, so it's easy to pull it out or trick someone. So when they talk about it, there's a few different ways it shows it was held. You can have it inside here, underneath. You can have it over top, forward like this, which would be a little more obvious to see. But you could keep it inside closely and quickly whip it around and stab someone with it, even if it's just a little bit inside of there. And so like I was saying, this type of shield, the small round shield, was used in Scottish history for a long time. The embellishments, everything came later, which is what we know as a highlander shield. But this type of shield was used frequently by the Scottish spearmen and lighter troops during the wars of Scottish independence. And it was described that at the Battle of Falkirk, the Scots used a round shield to ward off the longbow arrows, and by Bannockburn in 1314. So it was clear that the people in the front were using small round wooden shields to fend off the arrows, which means of course that it faced the English warbow. So in the 14th century, in the Scottish War of Independence, it was common that the spearmen used a small round shield. So we're going to test and see how this early prototype of a Targe does against my 130-pound warbow with the bodkin tips and about the 1500 grain arrows. So I'm not going to be too far away because I know if it's lobbed at like 50, 60, 70 yards, it's going to lose some of the energy and not have the same punching force. So I'm going to be about 25 yards to see if the charge is coming at me, if I can punch through that shield with this bow. But that definitely tracks with what I understand, in that they say there are preserved shields that do have bodkins stuck in them or piercing through them. So from that close range, you can see we had some strikes that would definitely be problematic. This one here, if the arm was here, this would have gone through the arm. This one here would have gone through and into the hand. These two bottom ones, I think it moved a lot when it hit those, so it actually diffused it quite a bit. But you can see if it's hitting it at a somewhat of a diffused angle, or even straight on if it's up here or down here, that's gonna be enough to keep you from basically having a fatal shot. It wouldn't be ideal. This one is pretty thick. As you can see, it's a hardy one. And so I would say that the English warbow with the bodkin tips for sure is going to still give you problems. And there was quite a few battles where the English warbow did in fact really turn this tide in favor of the English against the Scottish. Bottom two I was able to pop out really easily. These two up here, I'm going to have to go home and hammer them out or get them out a different way. So it doesn't make the shield unusable. You could break the arrows off of it, but it is certainly going to be an inconvenience if you're running around with two massive warbow arrows sticking out of your shield. It's just crazy to me when I see how big they are. Like, I always see them, but compared to this, I'm like, geez Louise, it's a javelin. Next up, let's see how it defends against some sword slashes and some thrusts. Coming over the top, that actually went in a lot deeper than I thought it would. That was an extremely clean, clear cut right through, but again, that's gonna get your sword caught if you come in at that angle, so that's gonna protect you from the thrusts. As with most things, it's hard to thrust through wood with a sword, so you know, it's gonna do its job there, but I was extremely impressed with how deep that went through here. My goodness, that's crazy. You can see this is actually 2 pieces of wood glued together, so it is on par with how they do it, but that's, I mean, it's a sharp sword, goodness gracious. That's actually a really cool, super clean cut there. So how was the shield and sword used in battle against a firearm? Well, the big thing was keep the pressure up. The Highland charge was a big part. Close the distance as quickly as possible to get in close. Once you're there, or as you're charging, make sure you have the Targe held up high, edge up to try and deflect the musket shots if you can at all. Again, if it worked, I don't know, but if you had it angled properly, it could deflect it enough so it won't hurt you or may not kill you. Once you get in close, Donald McBane talks about if they have a bayonet, what you're gonna do. Take the Targe, push the bayonet to the side, take the iron hilt basket, smash into the face, and then cut down across the neck. Talks a lot about quick snapping wrists. As with most swordplay, it's not large swings. You want quick slashing cuts in tight. Make sure you keep the shield in front of you. And again, it's just keep up that pressure. Now from 1680 on, there were professional fencing schools in Scotland that did teach how to use this in conjunction with the Targe for battle. As I mentioned earlier, one of the most famous was Donald McBane. Donald McBane was a Highland soldier turned fencing master, and he ran a famous school in Edinburgh after 1750. The way they trained was they had a pell post wrapped in leather for edge alignment practice. They had wicker swords and soft targes for full speed sparring, and they had specific drills against muskets and bayonets, because honestly that's who they were fighting. So it's like, you know, train for what you're fighting. And then just because I want to see how it cuts, I have this piece of wood here. I remember reading that there's a certain similarity to bone and wood. So I have this here along with some padding and some skin on the outside, and I'm going to see how well I can cut through this with the sword. So I apologize, the audio is going to be turned off there. I've been getting this weird static feedback thing. So you can see this cut here was through and through into the bone. So if I'm looking at the bone here, let's say for example, that was right here. So about halfway through this wooden dowel. So it's a pretty solid cut right there, honestly. But through here and here, you can see that's incredibly clean. Like that's solid cut and then straight into the bone. And then of course, just because I'm out here and I have this, I want to test and see if I can cut through it with this big boy here. Not all the way through that there was, same kind of cut. It was a much deeper gouge. You can see from this one here versus this one here, I had a lot more power in that. It cut much deeper and stronger. So I think if I was a better swordsman, I could probably get through. If you guys don't know, sword play is not my thing. I'm an archer, slinger, and a wrestler, and I mess around with swords. So I'm sure someone could, but still, impressive result and fun to do. Now, what were some of the battles that made it so famous? So to start, there was 1644 to 1645, which was the Montrose campaign, in which Basket-Hilted Claymore Highland wielding warriors destroyed the Covenanter troops up there, Tippenmuir and a few other engagements. In 1715 and 1745, there was Jacobite Uprising, and in 1745, at the Battle of Prestonpans, 2,000 Highlander troops slaughtered the British Redcoats in under 10 minutes. They charged them and wiped them out. In 1746, at Falconer, they are again successful against the government and rout the enemy. And lastly, and sadly, there's Culloden in 1746, which was the last charge. There were unfavorable conditions. It was wet ground. The British troops were volleying better. They were trained better. They were using their bayonets better. And it really was a bad day. That was like the last charge, really. It was a bad day. So how did this combination and this sword specifically stack up against other contemporaries of the time? Those, for example, being like the 1740s British Bradroon, 1700 small sword, and the German Palish. Well, the pros is that, you know, obviously your hand's going to be incredibly protected. This is a great striking device. It did provide some extra protection against hand strikes. So really that was very unique to this particular sword and worked extremely well. This combination of the Targe and the Basket-Hilted Claymore is considered one of the best weapons combinations of a shield and sword since the Middle Ages. Broad blade, while it wouldn't work against plate armor or armored troop, really excelled at cutting through cloth, wool, skin, and limbs. So it was very devastating at that time because there wasn't mail or armor to worry about. And honestly, there was a huge psychological component to this. If they were able to successfully do a charge, do the Highland charge, break into the rakes, it was very demoralizing for those they were fighting against. It really did wonderfully at night attacks. They could close that distance where the muskets weren't going to be as useful. Surprise attacks. It really carried a lot of weight with it because people knew that people that were charging at them with this were very skilled in what they did and were very deadly. But what were some of the cons? Well, it was a sword and a shield in the time of firearms. So there was a high risk if you couldn't absorb that volley, or if the troops were trained really well and were able to do good volley fire like in Culloden, you really were in a bad situation. Additionally, if the troops had good discipline and were trained well, they did still have basically what was going to be a spear with the bayonet against the sword. If they hold that line, it's going to be very difficult to get in there and break through. The other thing was a high barrier to entry. As opposed to a musket, you couldn't just give this to a conscript and expect them to be skilled or excel with it. They really need to have courage and training to make it work well, and so if you're losing well-trained Highlanders in every battle, it's going to be hard to replenish those ranks with skilled individuals who can make it happen. So against contemporary swords of the time, I really feel like this is probably gonna be one that would take the cake most of the time. So why did it disappear? Well, after the defeat at Culloden, the British banned Highlander dress and the weapons. They still raised Highlander units, but they took away the Targe. However, it still appeared even in the Napoleonic Wars with Fraser's Highlanders, where it's noted they had basket-hilt claymores. And then again at 1845, I forget the name of that battle, sorry. But they still continued through history. But during that time in the Napoleonic Wars, they did not use the Targe. Instead, Fraser's Highlanders still kept the Basket-Hilted Claymore, but they would have a musket with them as well. Once again, this video is a very special thanks to Cult of Athena, who furnished me with my armaments for this video. The Basket-Hilted Claymore, the Targe, and of course, the Hidden Dirk. So thanks to them. If you guys are looking to buy something fun, check them out for the holidays, let's say. Who knows? I have an affiliate link, so feel free to use that. If not, no big deal. I'm excited to be able to make some videos here and there again, so thank you so much, as always, for tuning in and being patient. But hope you learned something, as always, and have an amazing day.